Hey crafters, Big D here, and as part of No Bolter November, I'm doing some bases for my Stormcast army. These are a rocky foothills type grassy plains. Really simple materials. You just need some flock, your bases, some sand, and some super glue, and your paints. We'll go over the whole process. Is really great. I've made these before for single figures, but I wanted to do my entire Stormcast army with these. So if you've been following my Instagram this week, you'll see that I did all 52 of these bases in one sitting. So we're going to go over my process, teach you guys how to do it, teach you how to epic your figures, and you know the rest. So let's go hit the table. All right, crafters. So here we go. This is our rocky base, rocky plains. Now it's really simple. You just got to get yourself some ordinary play sand, the one that's got mixed aggregate in there, and you're going to want to sift it. You get yourself a flour sifter and you sift out the big rocks, and then you sift down the fine stuff. So you've got two grades of sand that you're working with. So you're just going to take a little bit of super glue, and you're going to pick a spot where your rocks are going to be their biggest. And I'll just pick a piece here right by the edge, and I'm going to take the bigger rocks and I'm going to dump them on that spot. Just shake them a bit off. And then you're going to take some more of your super glue, and out from that, from the edge of that, you're going to go out a little bit, and you're just going to create a splotch of land. Now remember, you're going to want some spots for your character's feet to go, so you don't want to go completely crazy and cover the whole thing up. Then once you've got a good splotch, you're just going to take your fine sand and you're going to cover the whole base and shake it off. And now you've got a nice rocky bit. And then if you're worried about some coming loose, just put a couple small drops of glue on the top of it and then let that dry. And you can take the stuff you've poured out and put it back in your unsifted box so that you can sift it back again later. And all you want to do is you want to take this, let it dry, and then hit it with your primer, which will lock everything down even further, lock everything in place, and get it ready for painting. So go ahead, get your bases set with this, prime them, and then come back and we'll talk about colors. Alright, crafters, so we have our primed base. Now we're going to use a dark brown. I'm using Americana dark chocolate. You could use a mini paint on this. I normally don't, not for bases, unless I'm going for a very specific color that I can only get. But you're going to give a kind of a moderately heavy coat here. You want to make sure you get everything thoroughly coated in this dark brown, this dark muddy brown. Now, the thing to remember is that with a craft paint, this doesn't have the pigmentation that, say, a miniature paint has. So you will have to do at least 2 coats, and it'll dry darker. So this is what it looks like after 2 coats, and you really get what you're looking for here. It's a nice solid brown. You can see your detail because you're not putting it on like glooping it, but you are putting it on nice and firmly. So this is what you're going for. So take your bases and take your dark brown and give them that 2 coats, and give them that thorough so that you're not seeing any of your primer, you're not seeing streaks, you're not seeing brush strokes. The flat areas aren't as important because we're going to cover them with flock, but you still want to make sure it's nice and thorough. So get your bases painted and we'll be back. Okay, crafters. So we've got our nice dark chocolate brown. It's really, really nice looking on there. And now we're going to do the first layer of dry brushing. So we're getting a golden beige type brown. I'm using actually apple barrel territorial beige. And we're just getting a little bit on the brush. And then like you would do with a dry brushing, you rub most of it off. And then we're going to do a very aggressive. So there's going to be a lot of it on there. But we're only doing it on the areas of the rocks. So you can see here, nice aggressive dry brushing. Got another good example right here and here. So we want to aggressively get that in there, really work that in a nice heavy dry brushing, and then let that dry. And once it's dry, we're going to come back and we're going to do our wash. So we're going to want to get some Agrax Earthshade. So go ahead, get your Agrax, get this stuff dry, and then we'll be back. Alright, so our dry brushing is fully dried, and now we're on to our next step. And I've got two different bases that I've done. One I've got a whole lot of terrain on that I'm using for a very specific character, and one with just a normal amount of terrain. And what we're doing is we're just taking a medium shade brush, or whatever you want to call it, a medium brush, and I'm just putting a heavy amount of undiluted Agrax Earthshade right from the pot right into place. So just like that. And that's looking really, really great. Gosh. So turning out wonderful. Alright. So do this to your bases and then let this completely dry. It means you may need to let it dry for well over an hour, a couple hours even, because the next step is we're going to be doing one last final dry brushing over the top of this. But we want to make sure this is fully dry when we do that. So get your Agrax, get them all shaded up, and we're going to come back and do that final highlighting dry brush on it. Okay, crafters, so our wash is dried, and we're ready to do our final dry brushing. So I went and I did a couple different colors, so I got the one I liked, and I found that Xandri dust actually gives me the color I'm looking for the most for these. So again, you're just doing a very, very light dry brush with Xandri dust. Just trying to pick out the highlights and the details. You don't want to go too hard, you don't want to go too crazy. You just want to pick out some highlights. And see, look at that. Now you got a really, really beautiful depth of color there. And the nice thing is, if you go too hard and you think you did your dry brushing too heavy and you think it's washed out too much of your depth of color, what you can do is you can go back with your Agrax Earthshade and water it down a little bit, and then go right back to it right over it with a watered down Agrax, like about a 1-to-1 water to shade, and that'll just add some depth back to what you've done without completely washing out the highlighting you've just done. Alright, just some nice subtle highlights. Sandry dust is really, really great for that. And now you've got some real depth here. That's going to be it for the base painting. So at this point you're going to want to rim your bases with whatever color you're going to do. I'm going to use black because that's how I make all my bases. But if you want to do your army in some other color or whatever, rim your bases and then seal the base with your lacquer so that it's all sealed and locked away, because we're going to be doing some more work on the base. We don't want to rub off or scrape off any paint accident with what we do. So we want to preserve our nice paint job here. So do your light dry brush with Sandry dust, rim your base, seal it, and we're going to come back and talk about flocking. So for our turf, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some 50/50 Modge Podge and water mix, and we're going to coat all the lowlands, all the flat areas that we haven't put any texture on, with a good coat of it. And then we're going to sprinkle on some very fine blended turf in a greenish brown color. It's called burnt grass. So you're going to put that on there. Shake off that excess. And then we're going to take some pure PVA using Eileen's tacky glue. And we're going to take the same brush and we're going to cover some of the areas where there's a little bit of terrain, and the edges where the grass meets the rock. Maybe some areas in the middle there, just to kind of break up and add some more visual interest to the base. And on this, we're going to sprinkle a coarser turf. It's a mixture of a light, a bright green, and a darker green to show where the water from the hills and the foothills is running off on. Just gonna pack it on there. Shake off that excess. Now you can see we've created a really nice mixture of colors and terrain here. And in the morning, we'll come back and take a look at it and a few of the other ones we've made so far. Okay, crafters, so here we go. We've allowed our flocking to dry, and then afterwards I did neglect to mention that you're going to want to spray them down, because these are covered in flock. You want to spray them down with a 3-to-1 ratio of what I call flock glue. It's basically 3 parts water and 1 part Modge Podge matte. You give them a heavy spray, let them all get coated, let it dry overnight. and now your flock's really nice and hard. These bases are really sturdy, and they're going to put a figure on here, and they are going to last forever. These are gorgeous. You've got multiple layers of color, you've got multiple tones, you got some nice texture to add some interest, and when you put a bright colored character or a bright colored figure, like I'm going to be doing Stormcast for these, they're really going to jump off the table and look gorgeous. So, simple tutorial, simple stuff, but it epics your figures, which will epic your board. Thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let people know we're here to help you up your game. Game on.